whip for the parliamentary opposition for the People's Progressive Party Civic. On this program, we shall focus on matters of public importance, bringing you information and discussions on issues and matters that of concern to you, the Guyanese public, every Thursday between 12:30 and 1:30, right here on Channel 6. Before we get into the meat of the program, let me remind you, as always, of the telephone numbers 225-0010 and 225-0008. Some of you know the numbers well because you call in here very often. We'll try to start taking calls by 1:10, so stand by, and I hope that you will find the program interesting. As I always do, I remind you every week of the telephone numbers for the Office of the Leader of the Opposition, at 304 Church Street between New Garden and Peter Rowe Streets, right across from the Border Cricket ground. And so 225-3432. Last two digits are easy to remember, 32 being the number of PPP Civic Members of Parliament. And so we also have Fredo Radio that you can tune into on the FM, 91.1 for Demerara, 90.5 for Berbice, and 90.7 for Essequibo. And for Essequibo, we should be reaching as far as Maruka. So we hope that people will be tuning in. They have very good programs, and you have people like Dr. Luncheon and political commentary, programs for farmers, programs for women, etc., and of course music and inspirational programs. So I hope you'll find it interesting. You know, all the matters of public importance programs have two basic themes that we elaborate on and we play with every week, and that is based on what's happening. And the two basic things are the erosion of democracy and the Constitution, and the lack of transparency and accountability. You know, 2 weeks ago, remember, we focused on the economy, and last week we focused on a number of issues which illustrate the erosion of the constitutional and legal provisions. And we focused on the judiciary, the appointment of the lack of the appointment of the chairman of GCOM, the Commission of Inquiry into lands, in which Amerindian lands, ancestral lands, and all other lands will be under scrutiny. And of course, the government creating parallel structures to elected bodies and in order to, what we think is, diminish their powers. And lastly, I showed a number of photographs about the citizens' initiatives in response to what is happening with VAT on private education and also the parking meters, movement against the parking meters. This week we're going to focus again on some other issues. We haven't dealt with this for a while. Probably when we started in November 2015, in the early period, we talked about some of the extravagance and nepotism that was going on in the government circles. And today we come back to that, to focus on the levels of nepotism and corruption in the government circles, and the reckless and irresponsible action of the government with regard to the workers and the economy of this country. And of course, just to give you the latest on the state's asset recovery bill that will be coming up at next Parliament sitting on April the 13th. And I hope you'll be able to listen or to look at it. It's supposed to be live streamed from the Parliament website. Well, let's look at what's going on with what the government is doing in terms of taking care of their own and what's happening to the workers of this country. Through its most powerful spokesperson, that is the APNU AFC most powerful spokesperson, Joe Harman, the Minister of the Presidency, and obviously the right-hand man of the President, not Mr. Nagamutu, Mr. Harman, Mr. Granger's own party man. APNU AFC formalized by public announcement a policy of honorific awards. Remember, we asked questions about the 30-odd honorary advisors that they appointed overseas, and we had to fight for quite a while to get some of that information. Essentially, Harman informed the Guyanese people that the government considers jobs, both paid and unpaid, and other favors extended to APNU plus AFC's political donors and activists as normal, and honorific awards for family members as well. Another senior spokesperson for APNU AFC, Raphael Trotman, articulated and reinforced this obnoxious concept by justifying contracts and other favors provided to political donors, particularly business people. He argued that such donations are business investments and the government contracts are therefore the fruits of legitimate expectations on business investments. Business investments meaning contributions to the 2015 elections, to the APNU AFC coalition, and of course donations to the March 2016 local government elections to help APNU win the minority of the local authorities that it did win. You know, one form of corruption in particular is nepotism. And what is nepotism? That is where family, friends, and political people are awarded close to the government, are rewarded with jobs and other influential positions, including non-paid advisory status. And really it is to gain prestige and influence within the government circles. Those of you who see American news, you will see the big issue that has come up in the American Trump administration to do with the hiring of his his son-in-law and his daughter, and ensconcing them in the the West Wing of the White House. And there are big debates on this and whether it's appropriate or not. So that's the kind of thing that nepotism refers to. The APNU AFC provided early signals that nepotism was a friendly accommodation, and it was going to be part of the political architecture to prop up and promote the interests of APNU AFC. So they're quite unapologetic about it. And we have seen in Parliament, based on questions we've asked, family, friends, political activists, and donors are everywhere to be found in the actual public service itself. There are certain jobs that are always preserved for political appointees. For me, when I was an advisor to the president, I was an advisor to President Jagdeo and to also President Ramatar. These are political appointees, and this exists in every country. But when the traditional public service positions are politicized and extended to family, friends, political activists, and political donors, nepotism then replaces the independence of the public service and is against people, whether they voted or not for the government. One minister has his sister working in his office in a position she does not have the required qualification for. And for good measure, he also has his brother-in-law and nephew working with him, neither of whom meet the qualification criteria for any of these jobs that they've been given. They're all paid more than any other persons with much more senior positions and, of course, qualifications in the public service. This minister has made sure that these family members drive government vehicles to and from work and for non-work purposes. The government hired special prosecutors to investigate members of the former PPP government. And all of these were extracted from the law offices of ministers who are lawyers, who, of course, kept their law practices, although they're ministers. And so these were all colleagues and employees of those ministers' law offices. Another high-ranking, very high-ranking minister, in fact the first vice president, has his son-in-law facilitating and bringing in investors with specific reference. I'm referring to the looking for the investor for the privatization of Skeldon Estate, and the gentleman has been traveling around the world in India and China, etc. And the question is, who's footing the bill? This kind of behavior and this pattern of behavior is not unusual for the APNU AFC. And in fact, what it has led to, in order to create jobs for the boys and girls, that regular staff have been terminated or transferred in order to create room for these family members, friends, party activists, and donors in what is a brazen displacement of regular public service appointees by nepotism. Then you have each minister has advisors. Each minister, some have 2, some have 3, some have advisors, technical advisors, and special assistants. So there's quite a bureaucracy around the minister's office itself. And so, of course, they have their vehicles, they have special security, not just what we had, which was security at our homes, our residences, that is, guards. What these ministers all have is security, close men that follow them around to make sure that they're safe. I don't know who they're afraid of, and maybe knowing what they're doing to the people, they may be right, who knows. And then, of course, the allowance for rental of government rental of houses, residences, for the ministers have been increased. When we were there, this was capped at about 112,000, 20,000 if a minister was living out of town or didn't have a house of their own, and therefore the government provided rented residences for them if there weren't government residences available. Well, it's gone up now, and so there are ministers who are renting properties in Georgetown for $500,000 or $1 million per month. In addition to that, they've increased their overseas travel, and they do not have to account for the money that's given to them when they return, unlike what the PPP had to do. And so the allowances have gone up astronomically for when you travel. Some ministers have, such as the President, Prime Minister, have unlimited access to money, and of course they don't need to return it. And ministers, once the cabinet approves, of course, the money, then when they come back, they do not need to account for the money. You have to bring in hotel receipts and meal receipts and stuff like that. You just, whatever you spend, and what you don't, you pocket. Remember, Member of Parliament Bishop Edgehill has been brought before the Privilege Committee in Parliament for saying that the increased salaries and benefits will cost the taxpayers almost an additional $1 billion. Additional $1 billion between 2016 and 2020. Of course, this led to the government screaming bloody murder and decided that Bishop had to be punished. And of course, the different figures. The Speaker came up with his figures, which were about $600 million. The Minister of Finance, who protested so vehemently that Bishop Edgehill was wrong, came up with figures that were 300 and something million more. And of course, the Speaker, trying to be helpful to the government, did his own thing and found that it was over $600 million. So, and in fact, it's almost $1 billion. And if they keep giving themselves salary increases, which they got last year, and on top of the 2015 increases, that $1 billion will be surpassed by 2020. This is additional $1 billion. Well, let's look at some other people's offices, shall we? Let's look at the Prime Minister's office. Mr. Moses Nagamutu. According to the documents, because we asked question in Parliament, we had to wait several months to get the answers from the Minister's office. And here are the following. He has 2 advisors. One is $551,200 per month, plus allowances of $95,000 per month. His other advisor, which is called Safety, Security and Information Technology, is $391,000 plus $80,000 in allowances. Then he has 5 special assistants, and the special assistants are all not paid the same amount. What the special assistants do is not clear. However, one is paid $224,361 per month plus $18,000 per month in allowance. The other, which is a special assistant for public and diaspora affairs and investigations, whatever that means, because diaspora affairs I thought came under foreign affairs, is paid $336,000 plus $70,000 in allowances per month. And then you have a special assistant for Region 2, who gets $205,640 per month and also allowances of $42,500. I'm not finished yet. Special assistants in Region 6. Please note that he has special assistants in certain regions. Special assistant in Region 6, $205,640 a month plus $42,000 in allowances. Another special assistant for Region 10 with $205,640 being paid every month with $42,500 in allowances. The Prime Minister also has 2 administrative assistants outside of these special assistants in the regions. He has 2 administrative assistants in Region 2 and 6 who are paid $77,000 a month, an allowance of $20,000 per month, and so on. And then, I'm not finished yet, my dear friends. There's a regional representative in the Minister's office for Region 3 who earns $640,000 as a monthly salary, again with $42,000 allowance per month. And last but not least, we have, no, I'm not finished yet. We have the legal assistant to the minister, who is paid $190,800 per month and $20,000 in allowances. And then, of course, you know the Prime Minister oversights only one department, and that's the Department of Public Information. Imagine you need a whole Prime Minister's ministerial office to deal with the Department of Public Information, basically NCN, that's it, and GINA. And so his press secretary and director of public information, Imran Khan, is paid a salary of $551,220 per month, plus allowances and entertainment coming up to about 20-odd thousand. Of course, this excludes the Prime Minister's personal staff at his residence, security, around-the-clock security, as well as not only at the Prime Minister's official residence, but at his private residence as well. And 4 cars that accompany him, 2 police cars, 1 escort car, and his own car that follow him wherever he goes. Now remember, Prime Minister Sam Hinds used to have 1 escort car and his car, and Mrs. Hinds had 1 car for her to use. The Prime Minister alone has 4 cars, and then his wife has also car and escort car at her disposal, and we'll leave out the rest of the family for now. So this is a heavyweight, overblown bureaucracy that's enjoying itself and making sure that friends and family and party activists are well taken care of, at least some party activists. And in contrast, you have 1,972 Amerindian community service officers that lost their jobs in July 2015, and hundreds of public servants who were thought to be PPP by the color of their skin, ethnicity, and or political affiliation. But the government, having got rid of these people, have hired over 2,000 people in the public service to fill the bureaucracy. The majority of them are on contract since coming into office, and it is believed that this is a number of these people are not properly qualified for the positions they have, but they're clearly there for political work, and this is where we believe that they are now ensconcing an election machinery for their party, APNU-AFC coalition, embedded into the government itself. Two ministers have benefited from fully funded postgraduate scholarship, university scholarships to do their masters and doctorate. One is Annette Ferguson and the other is Nicolette Henry. And again, this was in response to questions we asked in Parliament and fought and finally got the answers. Whilst low-income children have to compete for limited scholarships, they're competing with who? Other children? No. They're competing with government ministers and their families. At the same time, the UG loan scheme has been reduced by the government, despite now there are increases in fees since last year, and there will be another set of increases of fees at UG, and they met and they have confirmed of a recent announcement this morning that the increases will proceed. And this is omitting, of course, the VAT on private education and all items for education, what impact it is having on young people who aspire to finish high school and to go on to do post-secondary education at a university and maybe even postgraduate degree, which is getting their masters and PhDs. And by the way, one of these didn't know the difference between Pagwa and Diwali, remember? So that's the person getting a doctorate, by the way. Anyway, we also have more. This is just piling it on you, my dear friends, today. Additional cost for foreign service officers. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs budget has increased in terms of administrative costs and employment costs, and has decreased in some key areas which have to do with foreign trade and foreign markets. But the total budget for 2017 has increased to $368 million to pay foreign service officers, ambassadors, and you know they've opened a number of new foreign missions globally in different parts of the world. And so here we go again. So the workers can't get a big increase, but all these top-notch brass can. And so let's look at that. And again, these were questions we demanded answers for. We waited several months, and we're now getting them. So that the monthly salaries of these are foreign service officers themselves are between $240,000 and $321,000. And these are those that are posted overseas. So this $368 million is dealing with those who are foreign officers who are based in foreign missions. That is our missions, but our missions overseas. So the salary is not astronomical in some cases. However, the allowances are astronomical. 1.5 million, right? As well as vacation allowance that comes up to another $1 million. Then you have the foreign service officer in Kuwait, is being paid 21.2 million Guyana dollars annually, including a vacation allowance of 1.5 million and a monthly station allowance of 931,500. So just that's the principal foreign service officer in Kuwait. In Kuwait. We're not dealing with the ambassador yet. In the recently opened mission in Trinidad and Tobago, why we have to have another mission for CARICOM in Trinidad when we are the host country for CARICOM, the headquarters are here. The principal foreign service officer is being paid $17.2 million annually, including a vacation allowance of $1 million and a monthly station allowance of over $1 million in Trinidad. Because a lot of the allowances used to be based on the country specifically. So if you were sent to Geneva, it's one of the most expensive cities in the world, therefore the allowance would be higher. And if you went to the CARICOM countries, it would be less. If you went to other countries, it might be in between and stuff like that. And so you have the $368 million for the remuneration packages for the foreign officers. They were not desirous of including the ambassadors in their answer to us. So you have this group of people that have been rewarded well. And according to Minister Greenwich, when I questioned him in Parliament, he said every ambassador or high commissioner salary is specific to them. So you can't get a standard across the board based on their requirements and what the government has negotiated and agreed with each individual one. So the costs are astronomical for a country of our size and our weight globally. And of course, so we have this bloating of this bureaucracy. And so whilst they attacked us on contract workers and people being paid salaries and what they call fat cats and super scale salaries, what they've done is eliminated a number of people, quite over almost 2,000 people, replaced them with 2,000 plus, because there's still a lot of people we don't know anything about. There are a number of advisors, presidential advisors and ministers' advisors. Despite the questions we've asked, they have not been included on the list, although we know that they are working with those ministers, they are benefiting from government vehicles and other facilities, but they're not being recorded in the list that we're asking for. So you have that whole thing going on one side. On the other side, what's going on? Well, I had given some figures of unemployment about 2 weeks ago when we talked about the economy, and I want to just remind you of those figures. And you will do the maths to see if my mathematics is right. Again, I go back to the 1,972 Ambernian Community Service officers who were fired, terminated in July 2015. All at one sweep, no reasons given, that's it. And what were they being paid? They were being paid about $30,000 a month because they would have their little farm in the villages, and they would there be working and helping the Ambernian village councils. All gone. Can you imagine the impact of that number of people impacting on the interior with villages that have 100 or 200 or 300 people? Some of the largest villages would have an impact on all this, because this is money coming home to the families in those villages. Then, at the minimum, approximately 300 public servants lost their job based on ethnicity and political affiliation. Then Wales as state was closed in December 2016. Another 1,700 people lost their jobs. And we'll leave out for now the impact on the surrounding areas in Region 3. 600 lost their jobs with the closure of Barama. Another 100 loggers who sell to Barama also have been impacted negatively. A lot of them don't know what to do with themselves, and this is particularly in places like Region 9. You had a number of nightclubs in Georgetown which were quite popular, and others that are closed for renovations but haven't opened back, and there's no renovations going on, and restaurants as well. That's about another 300 that have lost their jobs. And in the constructing sector, which used to hire over 5,000 people due to the housing drive of the PPP government, and also the capital works projects of the government and other investors, were over 5,000 people and contributing in a big way to the economy. There are several hundreds who've been laid off, that's lost their jobs, and there are others who have been given less hours to work. And so the figures are very difficult to deal with. At the minimum, it's 300 people. It could be much more than that. And of course, 100 lost their jobs with Demerara Timbers. This figure of 5,272 does not include the closure of Baishan Ling, for example, which impacted on several hundreds of workers who lost their jobs, as well as those who provided services to Baishan Ling. And of course, this figure does not include when they merged LBI and Enmo, several hundred of workers lost their jobs, and some were incorporated and sent to LBI. None of these figures include the number of small businesses that need these businesses to be able to make money. So the manufacturers who provide zinc and PVC, and the businesses who, the bottom house men and others who make the concrete blocks, all of these have impacted on the quarrymen who bring in the sand and the stone and the gravel and so on for roads and for housing and everything. They've been impacted on. So there's a ripple effect in terms of these people downgrading the number of people working on them. And then you have places that some of you may not be familiar with. If you're in Lethem, a small town, approximately 4,000 voters in Lethem, 2,000 odd voters in Lethem, a population about a little over 4,000 for the Lethem municipality. 3 large businesses in the industrial zone closed. Just closed. The business is gone. This is about 100 people who have lost their jobs in these three companies. The impact on a population of 4,000 is huge. And some of the 100 don't come from Lethem, they come from the satellite villages that are outside the municipality because there isn't a lot of work available. The impact is enormous on those economies and on those communities and families. In contrast, when you deal with Georgetown, with a population of about 100,000, when you have businesses reducing staff size to try to stay afloat, the impact may not have been as visible and tangible like in Lethem, but nevertheless, the impact is serious because a number of those workers come from outside of Georgetown, from East Bank, from East Coast, from Region 3. They commute and they work in the city. When they're downgraded and said, look, you can't work a 40-hour week, we can give you a 20-hour, well, that obviously means less money, or that you have to go home. There's no business. And of course, the parking meter story had exacerbated that whole decline in the economy and made it worse. If we go back to 1978 and 80, the redeployment phase of the Burnham government sent home 4,000 people, lost their jobs. And by the mid-80s to the late 80s, the combination of the Bauxite Company and the Guyana National Service, because a number of centers were closed down by President Hoyt, another 3,000 people lost their jobs. Because now, why do we talk about national service? People were employed to work as soldiers. That was basic in paramilitary activities. Now, so you have approximately 7,000 people who lost their jobs in the 80s, 70s to 80s, 78 to the end of 80s. And right now we have at a minimum 5,000, with a number of others we have not been able to record the figures properly, but we know it's happening. And so we could be talking about a figure that is far, far higher. And this, of course, doesn't include what is going on now in Rose Hall, Kanji, Iflut, Enmore, and the numbers. If those are close, then we're talking about adding another 5,000 to 8,000 people. And we're not even dealing with Skeldon, because if Skeldon is privatized, and we'll come to what's happening in these areas, then of course the numbers will keep going up. In the meantime, the sugar workers, many of them are not getting jobs. And so you have, for example, and we had said this before, but I'll repeat it, by the end of 2017, there will be only 3 factories open in operation: Albion, Blairmont, and Iflut. And it looks now as if Iflut is going to go completely. Then you have when you're talking about, we're not just talking about the factories now, we're talking about cane cultivation. When you go to Providence, West Kanji, and that's part of the Rose Hall, the sugarcane cultivation is closed. No new cane has been cultivated since June 2015, and all the old canes were harvested by the end of the first crop of 2016. Hundreds of persons employed as cane cutters at Providence have been unemployed since the first crop of 2016. Cane cultivation in other parts of the Rose Hall estate has been reduced in preparation for closure of the Kanji estate. And this, by the way, Rose Hall is one of the most successful estates in Gaisuko. At least 1,500 workers, sugar workers from this estate alone and cane cultivation area will lose the employment. So 1,500. So we have to add the 1,500 to the 5,000 odd I gave. And also we have known that sugarcane cultivation has ceased at LBI and Enmore. And therefore there now many workers have not worked for months now. And then of course we talked about Skeldon. And Skeldon, the first crop has been suspended, and there's ample evidence that the second crop at Skeldon will also be suspended. And so, as I pointed out, the Skeldon matter is a family affair between the son-in-law of the top number 2 man in this country, who has been facilitated to travel around the world to find investors who are willing to buy Skeldon. And of course, as you know, Skeldon is important because it also provides, the cogeneration facility provides electricity for Berbice and the national grid. When I talked about so what is going on in the sugar industry with workers, you're reading it all about the time. They haven't been paid. They're being told that the planters have to go cut cane. This sugar industry is a very structured industry. And this has come over years of struggle and workers' rights and trade union agreements and so forth. And you just don't suddenly pick up yourself and tell the weeding gang to go and cut cane. It doesn't work like that, and it hasn't worked like that for decades. And so this is all breach of what a trade union agreement and the agreement of the unions, GAU and CCW with the Gaisuko, and of course Saiku, who doesn't want to meet anybody. And then Moses Nagamutu, as usual, at Rose Hall has the gall at the 104th commemoration of the Rose Hall martyrs, the first time the government comes in to be involved with it, and has the gall to tell the sugar workers that, you know, we're not going to close the sugar industry. We have the sugar industry at heart. All we're going to do is close some factories. We have to tweak this whole thing in order to improve production. Well, my dear friends, if you can figure out the logic of that, you're really good. I couldn't figure it out. And so the impact of sugar, not only on the regions where it's being produced in terms of the workers themselves and their families, but on the communities, on the small business that are reliant on the sugar workers who get paid every Friday, and they come and they buy their food stuff and they pay their bills and they have a little drink maybe on the Friday or Saturday. This is community life in these areas. So all these businesses are hurting. Immediately when people don't have money or they're afraid they're going to lose their job, they begin to hold on to their money and they start cutting back on some things they might have done before. So they might have treated their children for a little ice cream or to go and look at a movie. They might have said, no, these things are out now, we can't do that. Cut back on the amount of food you're eating, or if you were eating chicken, you're cutting back on that, or fish, to try to save money and go back to dal and rice and callaloo, which tastes great. But the fact is that people were diversifying their diets. And so the impact on the other businesses is huge impact on the cane farmers themselves, the private cane farmers, on entire communities, health, education, regional way of functioning, local authorities who collect rates and taxes. It has a ripple effect that's enormous on the society and the economy and the nation. And so, of course, you have to remember, as I pointed out in the earlier program, that Gaisuko, based on old colonial times, the whole drainage and irrigation system at the back of us, that is those of us who live near the sea, is that we depend on those backlands. Those drainage and irrigation canals are cleared, kept clean to allow for water to flow. Who's going to clean? Who is going to invest and do what Gaisuko was paying for all these years? So when the government talks about this debt, Gaisuko was clearing the backlands for their own purposes, obviously, because they need to move cane, they need to have their cane producing well. But it also allowed the government to save money, because Gaisuko spent huge amounts of money on drainage and irrigation for their own purposes, but it impacted on all the coastal communities because it helped in the drainage and irrigation of the entire coast. There's no thought gone into what that will mean. And so, remember I also spoke to you about the Commission of Inquiry on the sugar industry, where the Commission itself said to the government that they should not have any closure of any estate, as the social and economic consequences would be catastrophic, not just to the industry, but for the nation. And so, this is their reckless and irresponsible action in relation to sugar. All of a sudden, sugar is a problem. Sugar is a burden. Half of the things they talk about sugar and this $80 billion are debts that they can write off because they don't even understand what they're dealing with. In contrast to what not in contrast, actually, part of this whole approach of this government to working people and to recognize the value of what they produce. And what is the role of government in facilitating the circulation of money and so on? It has to do with how they treat the workers, and they're able to encourage the workers to produce and to spend. And so let's look at the GPSU and the Public Servants Union, the Teachers Union, for example. There's an attempt now going on 2 years for the teachers to sort out their new agreement. They had a multi-year agreement with the PPP government, which they were kept to. They have not been able to go back and to sit with the government and get this resolved. So the teachers are in abeyance. Public Service Union, I don't know why Yard is so quiet, but anyway, because these things are not going well for the public servants either. They made demands before the 2017 budget debate, and after that they become very quiet. And so these unions, you have GAU, NASI, CCW, GTU, GPSU, the GLU, FITUG, GTUC. These are major unions representing over 100,000 people, workers that is, in the organized workforce, who are being severely impacted on the policies and positions this government is taking. Many of those may have voted for the government and who are sorely disappointed with what's going on. And then you have the discipline services, who, many of them I felt, probably supported the APNU AFC at the 2015 elections. That's their right to choose who they want. However, the first thing the government did, what we used to do is that all those in the Army, Police, Fire, and Prison got in December an extra month's salary. So in fact, they all got 13 months' salary instead of 12. And it was whatever their salary was. So you at the lower level of these discipline services, you might have got 50, 55,000 and so on. If you were the upper echelons of the police force or the discipline services in general, and you were getting 200,000, 300,000, that's what you got. Inspectors and superintendents would be at a higher rank than the guys at the bottom. And what did they do? In 2015, they said, no, we will give you an increase of 50,000 across the board. Well, those who may be at the bottom might not have been impacted because that is what they may have been getting all along. However, those going further up, above the 50,000, which is 2/3 of the police force, or the discipline forces, found themselves at a disadvantage where they were planning in 2015 what they're going to buy for their house or to pay their loan or their mortgage, and suddenly found instead of having 100,000 or 75,000 or 200,000, they had $50,000, and that was it. In the 2017-2016 debate and the budget, what did they get? About 25,000 each. So that the discipline services have been also treated with disrespect and not to understand. So a lot of talk about how important the discipline services are for us. But really, the treatment of the discipline services, the men and women in the discipline service, is not what it should be. It has actually gone backwards instead of going forwards. And in all of this, the Minister of Finance, I just laugh at what he says, because he says, and he says it with a straight face, that the economy will right itself. The economy will right itself. And we must ask him, how and when is this going to happen? when they're slaughtering two major industries. They're doing nothing to shore up bauxite and timber, for example. They're totally dependent on gold, and gold cannot forever hold out. And they're also doing crazy things with our commercial banking system, taking out $20 billion from the commercial banking system. They're going to make the supply of money worse, and of course the position with foreign currency has become worse because we're not selling. You damage the rice industry, you damage the sugar industry, you don't have enough foreign currency coming in from your exports, and therefore there's a reduction in the foreign currency available. However, they're dipping into the foreign currency reserves of our country and releasing 25 million US into the economy. However, there's still a shortage of foreign currency. And so, how, Mr. Jordan, are you going, how is the, I'm not saying I'm saying how is the economy going to right itself? You know, even when there was the big, in 2008, 2009, when you had the major global financial and economic crisis, the American government under Obama had to bail out Wall Street companies who were responsible for the crash. But they bailed them out because the impact on the American economy and global economy was so unbelievably huge that the American government could not afford that impact. This government seems to not comprehend that when you're closing down and doing nonsense in sugar, you're telling the rice farmers that you must go and find markets. You know, when you're hurting the timber industry, when you're hurting the mining industry, although you're dependent on gold, you're hurting the small and medium miners. You put in VAT and all sorts of things on them that they didn't have, including VAT on interior travel and on equipment, as you have done with the agricultural sector, where they have lost their exempt VAT on agricultural equipment. Ditto with the miners. They do refuse to meet these people. Your private sector calling for meetings, the Gold and Diamond Miners Association calling for meetings, the private schools association calling for meetings, the union calling for meetings. Nobody wants to meet. They are quite happily ensconced, my dear listeners and viewers, in the security and the green mansions of each of their office, because you can be sure that everybody's office has green curtains, green carpet, green chairs, and a little dash of yellow if they're PNC or gold. And if they're AFC, they got a little more gold than green, and so on. And that is the standard protocol. Just like Office of the President was painted 2 weeks before Christmas in the traditional colors that have been there since Burnham time, this palish pinkish color with the clay brick. And on Christmas morning, Boxing morning, scaffolding was up and men were painting Office of the President, now called Ministry of the Presidency, that iguana green. 2 weeks before. Who paid for this? Who paying for this? You and me and all of us as taxpayers. And then, of course, you have the ridiculous comment by Minister Harman that, we must all conserve money because money is in short supply. We must recycle envelopes. Well, I worked with Chetty Jagan from 1977, and we in the PPP never had money. And so we used to recycle paper and recycle envelopes, and that continued into our government. However, we didn't have this kind of squandermania and extravagance that this government has. And we just have to, outside of what I'm talking about, the things we've talked over and over again, Durban Park, the drug scandals, the drug procurement. And I told you before, the scandals have gone up to 29 from 26, what I announced last year. And you know some of those well, so I won't go over those again. We're convinced that the $2 billion that was for the procurement, put aside in the budget 2016, for the procurement of drugs, about 80% of those were never tendered for. And so the $605 million is really masking what is a much bigger problem with the procurement of drugs and medical supplies in the public health system. And as I said in a press conference recently, that the Guyanese people are hit with a double whammy. One is that all of these purchases of drugs are at a far higher price than what were paid before. And so there's less of the $2 billion that will be available to buy supplies that were in the health sector. And in addition to that, as I said, you using more of that money to buy less at a higher price. We still stuck. There will be shortages in the sector. And of course, before I bring in my callers in a minute or two, SAR, State Asset Recovery Bill. Most of you will think that's got nothing to do with you, right? Wrong. The State Asset Recovery Bill, which has been propagandized by certain media and the government, that this is to get these wicked PPP people and former government ministers and cabinet members. That, I'm sure, is the intention and the objective, but they've gone much broader than that, and that is that if you are found to be owing, you, me, all of us as taxpayers, we're found to be owing large quantities of money, or what they consider large quantities, left up to the Commissioner of the Guyana Revenue Authority, that they can seize your property under distress measures and sell it to recoup the money that you owe them. So this is not just politicians or public offices. It's for the general public. And therefore, next week, we have been calling on Amna Ali and the government that this bill should go to select committee. There are many people who have spoken out against it, not just the PPP, the private sector, Transparency Institute of Guyana, Christopher Ram, Nigel Hines, and a whole range of writers in the newspapers. And a number of those people have gone to the government and said, don't do this. It's a very bad bill. It's undemocratic. It will take away some of your basic rights that you have, and it will put property where property can be seized by this gentleman who now heads the Guyana Revenue Authority. And so we were talking and trying to get the government to agree that this should go to select committee. Well, the latest coming out of cabinet on Tuesday, and discussions between Minister Amna Ali and myself, she's the chief whip for the government, remember, is that no, the bill is not going to select committee. It is going to be debated and passed. Done. Story. So you have the message straight from the horse's mouth. And I would suggest that you get on the website on April the 13th and you look at and listen to the debate that will take place. So you can get live streaming, I assume, of the debate, and hope that there aren't technical glitches for when our people get up to speak. And as we're talking about state assets recovery and the role of the Guyana Revenue Authority and the director of this state asset recovery agency that we created, at any one time he can say to the Commissioner of Police that he has the role of the Commissioner of Police, the Chief Immigration Officer, the Commissioner General of the Guyana Revenue Authority, the DPP, etc. So he can assume the responsibilities of these heads of agencies who are appointed by Public Service Commission, Police Service Commission, etc., and or whose powers are enshrined in statute. This director of the State's Asset Recovery Agency or Authority will be able to assume these, and he can then designate to who he wants to investigate, to prosecute, to seize, to stop you at the airport, to do anything he wants. This is madness, absolute madness. And obviously, when you look at who comprises the State Asset Recovery Unit now, there's no one there who's qualified in these investigations. Clive Thomas, who heads it. Then you have a gentleman called Heath Ratmaya, who is an ex-army officer who lived overseas and has returned. You have Desmond Trotman, and you have Eric Phillips, who is an advisor to the president on other matters, but somehow he now is involved with State Assets Recovery Unit, and he is also the one propagating and has been fighting for this Commission of Lands, Commission of Inquiry into Lands. And so it's very incestual. But one last question I want to throw at you before I open the floor. We discovered that, and so I put the question to you so I don't get into trouble. Could someone tell me, who is paying for the head haunch of the Guyana Revenue Authority to go overseas every Friday and return every Monday of every week, of every month, traveling first class? Approximately come about $10,000 US per month, approximately. And that's only in airfare. So that's over $2 million a month just in traveling. And so who's paying for this? Is this part of his contract? The government's paying this every month so he can go home to his wife? Why can't his family live here? So, or temporarily, whatever, it's not my business what he wants to do. But why are we the taxpayers paying for that? And so what is his contract? Is his contract 2 million plus? Or is it that he has a contract that gives him a salary and the government has a special arrangement to pay for his airfare every single Friday, returning every single Monday? And he's not going just next door, Suriname or Venezuela or Trinidad. No. He's going further afield. So I leave that to you to think about. So let's open the floor and take some questions. Some people have been calling in, and we only have about 10 minutes left. Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to Matters of Public Importance. Okay. I think the guy must have got fed up with waiting too long. Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to Matters of Public Importance.
Good afternoon, Miss Gail.
Yes, good afternoon.
For your question, compliments to the taxpayer, and he must either fly to Vegas.
I don't know where he goes.
Spend some time and come back on Monday. And
It's-
here now, MP.
Yes.
I think that this government here open the gate wide now for violence against women, because when you start closing industries, there is where you're going to find violence against women going to increase, and abuse to children, and displaced children.
Yeah.
And they're going to become fast to children also. Because
Yes.
parents are able to mind them. Mothers don't get frustrated to go and look for money. Husbands don't go and drink and get out of hand.
Yeah.
And the list goes on, right?
No, I agree with you. The social
Government
consequences.
is a part of violence against women right now.
Yeah. I hope the women organizations are hearing that, and I will convey it to those that I know. I agree with you.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Stay strong.
Okay, bye-bye. Take care. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to Matters of Public Importance.
Hi, good afternoon, Ms. Gail. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you. And you?
I am actually trying with the new administration. I've actually voted for them.
Okay, that's
because
your
of-
right.
Because of some of the stuff that we would actually know about what was going on from the previous administration.
Right.
However, I commend all what you're saying, and I just want to ask you a few questions.
Sure.
What you're doing is highlighting to us what's going on within the present administration.
Right.
However, you were in the past administration or previous administration,
Right.
and we had many more stuff than that was going on.
Uh-huh.
We know for a fact that you had a better economy. I can testify to that. There was a lot of stuff that was going on, was doing well, and so the only thing that is going on right now is that there's a next set of persons who are actually having the hand in the cookie jar. And you're just not saying that they have the hand in the cookie jar. However, the cookie jar was being with you guys before. What you're doing, though, is just pouring the nation, and the nation is divided from since 1966 when Burnham and Jagan was there, and that's why we have a divided country. We want country to come as with six races, as one people, one nation, one destiny.
Sure.
I'm a youth. I'm going off from my youth age. Madam Gail Teixeira, I know you very well. I have pictures with you. You have pictures with myself when you was at the Ministry of Health, when you was at the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture. However, what we continue to do with this nation is keep people away from getting the truth. The previous administration had actually put us to the back pedal where we couldn't even talk to persons. Now we can get to talk to those same persons that we voted for and we paid by our taxes. However, to be honest with you, taxes could become a burden now to us. I will agree with you with that. The country is on a down low. That's true. The persons them who have businesses and has the money, they are keeping it back, so the country is not moving forward. It's all because what we are spewing, we're not making the nation as one. We're dividing it, and if we continue to divide it, the same thing that the new administration starts to actually learn from you guys, and they're now actually starting to put their foot on the pedal and keeping our country way back, and we're 50 years independent. And they're keeping it way back from where we should have been it's going to continue making my old days like yourself now, going to sit down on a television station and continue to talk about PPP, PNC, and if AFC ever get there, if Sharma get there, if a new administration go into, that's where they're going to continue to do it. What we need to do is heal the nation, come together, and actually show what we can do.
Okay.
There's a lot of committees and commissions that in the parliament. Why don't you guys just get on board? Just the other day, GPL actually named a whole board of directors, and there's a space there. And guess it's for who? The opposition. They're not
No. Wait. There is no space for us on the GPL board.
There's a
It is,
space
no,
there.
listen to me. I've listened to you very carefully, and I do have a program. I have 3 minutes left.
Okay, sorry.
I will focus on the issues. I promise you, in about 3 weeks' time, I will promise to focus on the issues you're raising with national reconciliation healing. I promise you that.
Okay, no
because I
problem.
think it needs to be
Let's get that way.
discussed.
I'm happy.
It needs to be
go through
discussed.
that because we have
It-
6
No, but it needs to be discussed because you can't be talking about national healing and unity and 17,000 workers in one industry are going to lose their job. And it's not, by the way, it's not GPL that we were asked to put a board on. Let me tell you just quickly. We received a letter on March the 24th inviting us to put a person on this new company they've created that took over from Wartsila.
Yes.
Power Producers something.
Yes.
However, the official gazette on March the 24th announced the members of the board. So we got the letter inviting us to be part of the board after the official gazette was put up and it was announced.
Oh my.
And then further, 2 days later, we got a call from Office of the President or the Ministry's office saying that the swearing in is tomorrow morning at so-and-so OP. Please tell us who your person is. We don't work like that. We have to consult, we have to talk amongst ourselves, etc. So I'm just correcting you on that. But I promise you,
Thanks for the correction.
I promise you, because this issue is being talked a lot about national reconciliation and healing and so on. And I think we need to talk about it. And I promise you, give me about the first or second week of May,
Yes.
and we'll start talking about this, okay?
I'll be happy if we start, and the sooner is the better, because we need to come together. And 60% of the persons then that voting is young people.
I agree.
We need to get together.
I agree. Okay. You take care. Have a great weekend.
Same
All
to
right?
you, Mom.
Bye-bye. Okay. I've got 1 minute left. Please, my apologies to anybody else. We've got to talk about certain things in this country because I'm hearing a lot of people talking about, the reason why we are the way we are is because that, we're these different ethnic groups and different political parties. And we need to talk about it because governments are based on action. And if we take, and I could go on about it, but I have 1 minute, and that is, if we contrast the treatment of the PPP with the bauxite industry, which was bankrupt in 1992, versus what is being done with sugar today, which is not bankrupt, by the way. It is going through some really rough times, but it's not bankrupt. And that what was done to make sure that Linden Town did not become a ghost town. It had difficulties, it had challenges, it was difficult, but money was pumped in annually to make sure that that community survived. Sugar is in a similar position and therefore requires, there's a moral obligation, not to do with ethnicity, not to do with political party you voted. It's a moral obligation of a government who has been elected by the people, whether people voted or not for them, to do what is right to help the sectors that are in trouble or who are going through trouble. So let's talk about this in 3 weeks' time. So next week you will have April 13th, the Parliament sitting at which the main and only bill that's supposed to be debated is the State Assets Recovery Bill. We have put forward questions on drug procurement, and of course the Speaker has to debate and edit and correct what he thinks are numbering mistakes we made, etc., etc. But anyway, we're big. We can take all these attempt to make us feel small. We're bigger than all of that. So next weekend is also Easter, and so we will have a program before that on the Thursday. And I hope that you have a great weekend and that you stay safe and you don't drink and drive. And if you are going to want to go and drink, find someone else who's driving who won't drink so you can get home safely. We want everyone counts. Everyone is important, and we want you and your families to be safe. In case I'm not here next week, I will arrange for the program to continue, and you may have a new face on, and you might like that face better than mine. So who knows? Then you'll be able to get a new program on. Who knows? But anyways, as always, it's really wonderful being with you. I hope the program has been useful and instructive. And again, we will come to you at matters of public importance next week, Thursday, 12:30, 1:30, right here on Channel 6.